Good morning. I am Dr. Patricia Blanton, and I would like to personally welcome you to the beautiful seaport city of Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore is known as Charm City, and it is easy to see why. Look around. Baltimore is a city of more than 220 neighborhoods, each with its own unique charm. From Baltimore Harbor, Francis Scott Key wrote the national anthem while watching the bombardment of Fort McHenry during the War of 1812. Baltimore is the home of many firsts. In 1774, the first post office in the United States was inaugurated in the city. During the 1800s, Baltimore served as the second greatest port of entry for United States immigrants. The first dental school in the world was founded in Baltimore in 1840. The first telegraph line in the world was established between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore in 1844. There's no shortage of famous faces that have called Charm City home, including Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian of all times. He holds 22 medals. Michael was born in Baltimore. Famous Major League Baseball players, Babe Ruth, Cal Ripken Jr., Billy Ripken, Lefty Grove, Frank Home Run Baker, and Harold Baines were all born in Baltimore. Edgar Allan Poe's mysterious death occurred in Baltimore, and he was laid to rest at Westminster Hall and Burial Grounds. Thurgood Marshall, the first African-American Supreme Court Justice, was born in Baltimore in 1908. Billie Holiday, the late world-famous jazz singer, was born in Baltimore. A monument in her honor stands on the corner of Lafayette and Pennsylvania Avenues. Baltimore as the center of healthcare education reform. Until 1840, dental practitioners' degrees of competence varied greatly. Practitioners were generally untrained, self-educated, or recipients of apprenticeship training from an established practitioner. In 1840, Horace Hayden and Chapin Harris established the world's first dental school, the Baltimore College of Dental Surgery. The establishment of this Baltimore College of Dental Surgery is seen as one of the three crucial steps in the foundation of the dental profession in the United States and around the world. A true profession is built upon a tripod: a formal organization, a formal professional education, and a formal scientific literature. Founded in 1840, the Baltimore College of Dental Surgery received its charter by an act of the Maryland General Assembly. It matriculated its first 2 students in 1841. With the founding of the college, dentistry became a profession separate from medicine. Dentistry could have become a medical specialty if the Maryland legislature had approved a request to incorporate it as a department at the University of Maryland's medical school. But the latest request was rejected owing to cost. Dentistry then set its own course. The Ohio Dental School was established in 1845, followed by the Transylvania School of Dental Surgery and the Philadelphia College of Dental Surgery in 1850. By 1876, 15 dental schools had been established. Toward the end of the 19th century, American medical education was in chaos. Most medical schools were little more than trade schools. Often it was easier to gain admission to one of these than to a liberal arts college. With the opening of the Johns Hopkins Hospital in 1889, followed 4 years later by the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, Johns Hopkins ushered in a new era marked by rigid entrance requirements for medical students, a vastly upgraded medical school curriculum with emphasis on the scientific method, the incorporation of bedside teaching, and laboratory research. As part of the instruction and integration of the School of Medicine with the hospital through joint appointments. For founding physicians, Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, every one of the big 4 doctors, as they are known at Hopkins, was a character, a larger-than-life personality. There was pathologist William Henry Welch, a stout bachelor whose favorite pastime was a week of swimming, carnival rides, and 5 dessert dinners in Atlantic City. Surgeon William Stewart Halstead, whose severity with students masked an almost debilitating shyness. Internist William Osler, the king of pranks, and gynecologist Howard Kelly, a snake collector and evangelical saver of souls. As Hopkins' most famous medical school professors, they sat in John Singer Sargent's London studio in 1905 for a portrait that now hangs in the Welch Medical Library. Each of the doctors in his own way had a profound and lasting influence on American medical education and research. This morning, I am standing in front of the Dr. Samuel D. Harris National Museum of Dentistry. This museum celebrates the past, present, and future of dentistry. Located on the site of the University of Maryland's first dental infirmary and laboratory building, which was then part of the dental department in the School of Medicine in 1882, and then housed in the university's second dental school building erected in 1903. This National Museum of Dentistry is located at the heart of the University System of Maryland's founding campus in Baltimore and at the epicenter of the beginnings of professional dentistry. And with that, let's now go inside the Samuel D. Harris National Museum of Dentistry and join Dr. Teresa Gonzalez.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Samuel D. Harris National Museum of Dentistry. Now, I'm sure before you enter, Dr. Blanton has already extolled the virtues of the great city of Baltimore. And she's right. Baltimore is hugely important in not only the development of dentistry in the 19th and 20th century, but also medicine. And the Hopkins model becomes the model after the release of the Flexner Report. There is nothing about Baltimore that's not to love. And I'm privileged to be at the Samuel D. Harris Museum because it's in one of my favorite cities, and it's in the center of it. Now, when we talked about Baltimore, one of the things that often gets left out, and this is a tragedy, this is a national tragedy in my experience, and that is that Baltimore has all the firsts that Dr. Blanton mentioned. It has this enormous history with the development of dentistry and medicine. It now houses this unique Smithsonian affiliate museum, but it was also the setting for the Broadway musical Hairspray. And it is not possible to walk through the streets of Baltimore and not break into song. Now, I'm going to spare you that this morning because we're here to talk about the museum. But Baltimore is the gift that keeps giving. On Green Street and in this location is the Samuel D. Harris National Museum of Dentistry. It opened in 1996. It would reach an affiliate status with the Smithsonian Institute of affiliate museums in 2003. And if you were to Google its principal benefactor, Samuel D. Harris, almost everything you would know about Samuel Harris, Dr. Harris, would be in the context of the museum, as if all of his life was all related around the development of the museum. This was an important part of his love of the profession and the history of the profession. But there is so much more to Samuel D. Harris. And I'd like to take a minute to introduce you to the man, Samuel Harris, for which the museum is named, and who contributed immeasurably in time and talent to the development of the Samuel D. Harris National Dental Museum. This museum explores the history of dentistry in the United States, and it includes many famous artifacts. It opened, as I mentioned, in 1996, and in 2003, it became a Smithsonian affiliate. It includes over 40,000 objects pertaining to the history of dentistry. Now, this is important for dentists. You should visit this location if you have an interest in history. You should visit the museum if you have an interest in dentistry. And if you have an interest in dental history, you should come regularly to the museum. Let's talk about Samuel D. Harris. The Harris family immigrated from Russia in the early 20th century, originally settling in Ontario, Canada. And then after 8 years in that locale, they moved to Michigan. A young Samuel would go on to attend Detroit public schools and stay local to graduate with a Doctor of Dental Surgery from the University of Michigan School of Dentistry in 1924. While at the University of Michigan, he attended a lecture given by Dr. Russell Bunting about the anterior side of dentistry, which explained how dentistry for children is one aspect that could alleviate a large portion of the dental issues in adulthood that would arise without proactive oral health care. This lecture cemented Dr. Harris's path to becoming a champion for children's oral health. With recommendations from Dr. Bunting and from the Dean of the Dental School, Dr. Harris was accepted into the Forsyth Infirmary for Children in Boston a year after completing dental school. In dental school, he spent most of his time extracting teeth, but he also studied what little bit of material existed on dentistry for children at that time, and becoming very familiar with the authors of those works. After finishing at Forsyth, he returned to Detroit, eager to share his knowledge about children's dentistry and to find like-minded individuals to progress the field. As a result, what can be seen as a pilot for a national dental organization, Harris founded the Detroit Pedodontic Study Club in December of 1926. As luck would have it, the American Dental Association announced its annual convention in 1927 was to be held in Detroit. Dr. Harris was quick to take advantage of this opportunity by assembling a group of his contemporaries to discuss the formation of a national society focused on dentistry for children, and he was going to have that discussion at the convention. On October 26, 1927, just 3 years after determining to dedicate his life to children's oral health care, Dr. Harris had laid the groundwork for establishing the American Society for the Promotion of Children's Dentistry and its companion journal. He followed up the creation of the national organization with pushing for state units as a means of encouraging wider representation in the field. At the 1931 meeting of the Michigan State Dental Society, Dr. Harris formed the Michigan Society for Dentistry for Children, and by 1940, Dr. Harris was integral to helping establish 19 other state societies. In 1952, the newly named American Society of Dentistry for Children celebrated its 25th year of success. Dr. Harris utilized the occasion to expand the impact of dentistry by reaching out to dentists around the globe, helping to establish similar societies in Latin America, South America, and Europe. By 1954, the Pan American Council on Dentistry for Children was established with Dr. Harris as its president. But it was not until 1969 that Dr. Harris's vision of an international society would be totally realized. 20 years after its inception, the International Association of Dentistry for Children would recognize Dr. Harris for his efforts and achievements with honorary membership to the association. Around this same time, Dr. Harris received his long-deserved recognition from the International Association of Dentistry for Children. A group of American dentists and dental organizations were meeting and working to establish a National Museum for the profession of dentistry. Dr. Harris had been interested in this idea for some time, as indicated from a 1983 letter of his to the Smithsonian Institute, in which he states, "Over a period of 60 years, I have seen dental memorabilia totally lost to posterity and wonder how much of it is being salvaged by the Smithsonian and/or should the American Dental Association be establishing a repository for preserving such historical items." Once he found out that the museum needed additional funding to go from an idea to reality, he did as he was accustomed to. In pursuing his interest and supporting what he believed in, he did this by donating $1 million on June 3, 1992. And by the time the museum opened on June 22, 1996, he was recognized for his support in not only having the museum being named the Dr. Samuel D. Harris National Museum of Dentistry, but by also being the individual to cut the floss and officially open the doors to the public. Dr. Harris continued to be an integral supporter of the museum until his death in 2003. His family continues his legacy of philanthropy and support of dental education and the advancement of the dental field, especially when it comes to dentistry for children. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I've given you a better idea of the philanthropist, benefactor, advocate for children's oral health, and professional that this museum is named from. Dr. Samuel D. Harris was truly a Renaissance man, interested in many things, advocating aggressively, providing revenue, providing talent and treasure to ensure that these ideas became reality. I can't help but think he would be thrilled today to know that we're standing in front of his portrait, thinking about dentistry and thinking about his contributions, and to have this glorious three-floor structure with 40,000 artifacts and memorabilia that are now housed in this museum. I would like to thank once again, the assistant director of the Samuel D. Harris National Museum of Dentistry, Mr. Patrick Cutter, for his generosity in opening the doors to the museum and allowing us to bring the museum to you. As we can't come here in the COVID era, we can bring this to your home. I hope you'll enjoy the tour. I'll meet you on the other side. Well, welcome. As we go into the museum, we'll point out a few things of your interest. I hope will be of your interest along the way. I want to start with a 1605 sort of quixotic quote from Don Quixote. And Don Quixote says, "For I would have you know, Sancho, that a mouth without molars is like a mill without a stone, and a tooth is more precious than a diamond." And so we know the value of teeth in antiquity and historically, and we know that maladies of the dentition have always been a source of difficulty. What you're going to see on these beautiful placards here in the museum is sort of what I call the phases of dentistry as it develops from essentially the mid-20th century on. There's going to be a huge prevention aspect of dentistry, and we know for all disease, what matters most is we have treatments for disease, but the single best approach to all disease is prevention of disease. What is true then is true today. So dentistry has its roots in public health and prevention, and quite frankly, this has become a model for most of healthcare delivery and ambulatory outpatient care is the prevention models of dentistry. As we move from that, we look a little bit at water fluoridation. Water fluoridation is one of those great achievements of the 20th century, right? Water fluoridation matters, and it helps reduce the burden of dental disease and the infectious disease that is dental caries by a public health initiative called water fluoridation. From water fluoridation, we talk a little bit about maintenance and hygiene and how important it is to maintain the dentition. And we must start this very early. This must become a lifetime habit. That oral hygiene begins essentially at birth and it ends at asystole. And the management becomes very, very important. So lots of programs in the schools about the development of oral hygiene. And even on this placard, you can see a young Shirley Temple in the 1930s brushing her teeth as a demonstration. Now, none of this prevention, or most of this prevention, would not have been possible if it had not been for the development of the workforce. And critical to that development was the development of the dental hygienist. The dental hygiene workforce essentially made the routine delivery of care and preventive care available for the masses. Their particular role in the oral health care successes that we enjoy as a nation and as a practice and as a profession are hugely the hygiene community was hugely integral to that approach. And I'd like to thank them publicly because I don't think we could ever thank them enough. Well, one of the favorite stops in this room is the display case I am standing beside now. And this is called Her Majesty's Crowns. And these are Queen Victoria. We're going to talk a little bit about Queen Victoria. Apparently, oral hygiene was very, very, very important to her and her children, and she was frequently known to give discussions of them. And we're going to talk a little bit about Queen Victoria. Now, one of the reasons this case is so often visited is not only did it belong to Queen Victoria, but because the instrumentation is so beautiful. And I have said before that when you grow up in the home of a British war bride and a D-Day survivor, you're going to get to know two things: all the American presidents and all the British monarchs. And none are probably more intriguing to me than Victoria. She was born in 1819. She was the Queen of the United Kingdom and Great Britain and Ireland from 20 June 1937 until her death. She adopted the additional title of Empress of India on 1 May 1876. Known as the Victorian era, her reign of 63 years and 7 months was longer than that of any of her predecessors, save her successor, Queen Elizabeth II. The Victorian era was a period of social, political, and military change in the United Kingdom. It was also marked by a great expansion of the British Empire. Though a constitutional monarch, privately Victoria attempted to influence government policy and ministerial appointments. Publicly, she became a national icon who was identified with strict standards of personal morality. Victoria married her cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, in 1840. Their children then married into the royal and noble families across the continent, earning Victoria the nickname the Grandmother of Europe and spreading hemophilia in European royalty. After Albert's death in 1861, Victoria plunged into deep mourning and avoided public appearances. As a result of her seclusion, the United Kingdom missed their monarch, and she fell out of temporary favor. But in the latter half of her reign, her popularity completely recovered, and her golden and diamond jubilees were times of public celebration. She died on the Isle of Wight in 1901. So in this container and in this cabinet are the beautiful instruments that belong to Dr. Edmund Saunders, Queen Victoria's dentist. Now, the connection of Dr. Saunders and Baltimore is significant. In 1845, he is awarded an honorary degree from the Baltimore College of Dental Surgery. In 1846, he becomes and is appointed to the Crown as the dentist for Queen Victoria, and he's going to serve in that role from 1846 to 1883. At the end of his tenure with the Crown and with Victoria as his private patient, Dr. Saunders was knighted, becoming the first dentist to be knighted for service to the Crown, although there have been many since. Well, we're going deeper into the museum now. We're still on the first floor of the Samuel D. Harris National Dental Museum. And now we are looking at one of my favorite stops in the museum, and that are these porcelain carvings of the toothworm. And we'll get a chance to look at these a little closer, but these are extraordinary, the amount of detail that's captured. Now, the toothworm theory existed for millennia in terms of what caused pain in the dentition. As long as there have been teeth, there have been maladies associated with teeth. And of course, the toothworm was used by the ancients to reconcile the amount of pain that was present with the diseases of the dentition. Now, prior to the scientific revolution, the ancients believed that these maladies were caused by the toothworm. It was supposed that disease was caused by small worms that were resident within the tooth. The gnawing worm was held responsible for many evils, and particularly blamed for toothache. The toothworm has an incredibly long history and wasn't ruled out as the cause of tooth pain until approximately the 18th century. During the Age of Enlightenment, doctors replaced this long-held superstition with the appropriate scientific rationale. Now, the toothworm takes on many forms. British folklore had that the toothworm resembled an eel, while the Germans believed it had more of a maggot-like worm configuration. It was red, blue, and gray in color. These images of the toothworm appear not only in art, but also in carvings of the era, and they are prized collections of the Samuel D. Harrison Museum. We're standing now in front of a display called the Dental Renaissance, and two of my favorites are in this. First of all, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, a Dutch naturalist and inventor of the microscope, is on this side of the panel, and of course across the panel is Pierre Fauchard. And there is not a dentist on the planet who doesn't know who Pierre Fauchard is. Let's talk a little bit about Pierre Fauchard and how his methodology, combined with the use of the microscope, would forever debunk the concept of the toothworm. Pierre Fauchard was a French physician. He's credited as being the father of modern dentistry. He was widely known for writing the first complete scientific description of dentistry. Le Surgeon Dentiste, The Surgeon Dentist. He published it in 1728. The book described basic oral anatomy and functions, signs and symptoms of oral pathology, operative methods for removing decay, and restoring teeth. He also discussed periodontal disease and the replacement of missing teeth, and discussed tooth transplantation. Despite the limitations of the primitive surgical instruments during the late 17th and 18th century, Fauchard was considered a highly skilled surgeon by many of his colleagues at university hospitals. Fauchard made remarkable improvisations of dental instruments, often adapting the instruments from watchmakers and jewelers and tradesmen and repurposing for use in dentistry. Fauchard introduced dental fillings as a treatment for dental cavities, and he asserted that sugar derivative acids like tartaric acid were responsible for dental decay. He also suggested that tumors surrounding the teeth and in the gums could appear in later stages of decay. Fauchard was the pioneer of dental prosthesis and discovered many methods to replace lost teeth. He also suggested that substitutes could be made from carved blocks of ivory or bone, and those artificially made dental pieces could be as useful as natural ones. One of these methods stated that artificial teeth would be held in place by tying them to the remaining solid teeth by pivots. The pivots would be using wax thread or gold wire. We're standing in an area of the museum which is dedicated to the American College of Dentists. This area includes many of the memorabilia that are specific for the college, that over its 100-year history have been developed. For example, the original gavel, our academic regalia unique to the college, the glorious Gorham-produced mace and torch that are used in the ceremonies of the college and will be used this year in the 100th anniversary. They are normally on loan, on permanent loan, at the Samuel D. Harris National Museum of Dentistry. This year, and in honor of our platinum anniversary, from 1920 to 2020, we'll add one more accoutrement to our regalia, and that accoutrement will be the platinum stole. And I'm going to add that now. For all subsequent events at the college. Now, the American College of Dentistry, in the context of the history of dentistry, shares 100 years. And the 100 years that it shares, beginning in 1920, is critical. The college, it is said, was born in the Roaring '20s. The conditions for the development of the college I will go through in detail. But essentially, America had ended its involvement in World War I. We had gone over there and come back. We had learned a lot about the delivery of health care in other nations. We had just come out of a flu, a huge pandemic of 1917, often known as the Spanish flu. And this flu would have the overall effect of killing more individuals on a global sense than the wars combined. It's a very, very significant time. Fast forward 100 years to 2020. And as we come here, we are in the midst of a pandemic. COVID-19 has changed almost every aspect of our life. And in that pandemic, we are now entering our next period. So America is born in the American College of Dentists is born in a post-pandemic haze, in a post-war haze, and it celebrates 100 years of sustained achievement in a pandemic phase, also known as the COVID-19 era. I often say we were born in the Roaring '20s, and we have come of age of 100 years in what will probably be referred to as the Raging '20s. We are now on the second floor of the Samuel D. Harris National Museum of Dentistry, and I am standing next to, I'm sure you've already figured it out, Green Vardaman Black. Now, I will tell you, this likeness of Dr. Black is compelling. It's a compelling look. It is done to proportionate dimensions, and it's just extraordinary. This would be the layout of an 1870s style dental office with all of the appropriate dental instrumentation, and of course, the latest development in dental chairs. Now, there is much to know. There is not a dentist who practices on the globe who doesn't know G.V. Black. And we talked earlier about the importance of Pierre Fauchard as the father of modern dentistry. Well, I would say then if Pierre Fauchard is the father, then this is the grandson of modern dentistry, and this is particularly true for dentistry in the United States. Talk a little bit about who Green Vardaman Black is and his contributions. He is commonly known as G.V. Black. He is known as one of the founders of modern dentistry in the United States. He is also known as the father of operative dentistry. He was born near Winchester, Illinois, and he spent his early life on a farm. By age 17, Dr. Black began studying medicine with the help of his brother, Dr. Thomas G. Black. In 1857, he met Dr. J.C. Spear, who taught him the practice of dentistry. After enlisting in the Civil War, in which he served as a Union scout, he relocated to Jacksonville, Illinois in 1864. It was here that he began an active career and research in the developing and burgeoning field of dentistry. He studied dentistry for 20 months, as was common at the time, followed by an apprenticeship. He taught in the dental department at the University of Iowa, beginning in 1890, before moving to Chicago. He researched many important topics to dentistry, including the causes of dental fluorosis, what would constitute an ideal cavity preparation. One of his many interventions was a foot-driven dental drill. He is also known for his principles of tooth preparations, in which he outlines the proper methods to prepare teeth for fillings. These cavity preparations use principles of engineering and materials science to maximize strength and retention of the amalgam filling and to minimize fractures of the tooth, as well as to preserve tooth anatomy and to minimize pulp exposure. The phrase extension for prevention is still famous in the dental community and represents Black's ideas that dentists should incorporate more grooves and pits than those currently exhibiting decay as a preventive measure against those grooves and pits developing tooth decay in the future. Although today ideas have changed and the focus is much more on minimal intervention, Black published these concepts and ideals in his text manual of operative dentistry in 1896. Dr. Black joined the Illinois State Dental Society in 1868 and served as the society's president from 1870 to 1871. He was also elected the first president of the Illinois State Board of Dental Examiners, serving this position from 1881 to 1887. In 1883, Dr. Black was appointed to the chair of dental pathology at the Chicago College of Dental Surgery, a position he held for 6 years. From 1891 to 1897, Black was a professor of dental pathology and bacteriology at Northwestern University Dental School. In 1897, Dr. Black closed his private practice in Jacksonville, Illinois, and accepted the deanship of the Northwestern University Dental School, where he served until his death in 1915. We should also note that in 1900, he served as president of the National Dental Association, now known as the American Dental Association. In addition to developing a standard for cavity preparations, G.V. Black also experimented with various mixtures of amalgam. After years of experimentation, Dr. Black published this balanced amalgam formula in 1895. This formula and its variations quickly became the standard and would remain such for almost 70 years. Dr. Black's son, Arthur Davenport Black, continued the legacy of his father, continuing dental education and research, gaining academic and political support for the importance of these sciences in dental education, and making university education mandatory for dentists. Dr. Arthur Davenport Black is one of the founders of the American College of Dentists and served as the first secretary of the college, and that terminology was replaced by the executive director. So he's the very first executive director of the American College of Dentists. I hope you've enjoyed our visit with Dr. Black, to whom we owe a great deal of gratitude. Thank you. Well, as we come to the close of our visit to the museum today, this is an absolute must-stop. Behind me is one of my favorite portraits of George Washington. It's one familiar to all Americans. It was painted by Gilbert Stuart. And what is extraordinary about the painting is, of course, the contours of Washington's face. So this is the Washington that is printed on the dollar bill and several postage stamps, but it's extraordinary. And just to the right of me and outside your view, but there are a series of images of Washington as a young man, as a frontiersman, a scout, his time in the British military. And you can see different conformations of his face. And as the tooth loss becomes more dramatic, you can see the difficulty in trying to restore those contours for the painting. And George Washington had difficulty with the dentures he wore, although anyone would have, and we talk about that in just a moment. But in an effort to preserve the contours of the face, the artist Stuart does something kind of unique. He pads out the buccal folds with cotton to preserve the vertical dimension and give him a more proportionate look. Probably need to know a little bit about Gilbert Stuart. He's an interesting painter. He is born December 3rd, 1755. He's an American painter. He's from the Rhode Island colony, and he's widely considered to be one of America's foremost portraitists. He is best known for his unfinished works of George Washington. He began them in 1796, and it's sometimes referred to as the Boston portrait. Stuart retained the portrait and used it to paint scores of other copies that were commissioned by patrons in America and abroad. The image of George Washington featured in the painting has appeared on the United States $1 bill for more than a century and on various stamps in the 19th and 20th century. Stuart produced portraits of more than 1,000 people, including the first 6 presidents. His work can be found on display today at museums throughout the United States and the United Kingdom, most notably the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Frick Collection in New York City, the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., the National Portrait Gallery in London, and of course, the Museum of Fine Art in Boston. So this is the aspect of the tour that turns into Mythbusters. Now, I'm sure I was told growing up 2 things about George Washington. I was told that he never told a lie, and that was the basis for the cherry tree story. The other was that he had artificial teeth, but specifically that he had wooden teeth. I'm pretty sure that myth was perpetuated throughout generations in my family. And while he did have artificial teeth, he did not have wooden teeth. Wooden teeth were used as denture bases, but not in this country. That was largely in Japan. But he is going to have a series of teeth that are going to be repaired and restored, and it's going to use all of the technology of the era. And his personal dentist, Dr. John Greenwood, is going to create some elaborate dental prostheses for then General Washington, and then President Washington and beyond. When you get a chance to look at these in the display, I think that you'll find it intriguing, and you might wonder how anybody might have worn them. And I think I know why George Washington, rather than wear the denture, had his mouth padded with cotton to accommodate the portraiture. But it is important to look at, and so we'll take you through this arrangement with George Washington's myriad sets of dentures that were constantly in need of adjustment. So much so that he rarely used them other than publicly, but there are great letters of General Washington writing to Dr. Greenwood from Valley Forge and talking a little bit about different adjustments to his denture. So I think you'll enjoy this aspect. Now, our tour is complete. We're going to end here at essentially the display of George Washington's dentition. When you're in Baltimore, you must come here, and if you haven't, if you're planning your trip, put this on your list to come. As we close, I would like to invite our host, who I have been the guest of the museum this afternoon, and I appreciate this invitation during this time when access is not normally accorded. And I would like to thank Mr. Patrick Cutter, and I would like to welcome him now to tell me a little bit about his position here, because Patrick, please come in. You have the job I want. Please say hello to our group.
Hello, everyone. First off, I would like to thank Dr. Gonzalez and the American College of Dentists for including the museum in their centennial celebrations. Quite an honor. But yeah, my position here is a little bit of everything to deal with preserving the history of dentistry. And as someone who isn't a dental professional, it's a little bit easier, I think, for me to see how much dentistry really affects the entire world and our culture. There's a lot more to dentistry than just what dentists do. So not only do we preserve the history of the dental profession and celebrate that history, but we show how that influences popular culture, how that influences even the military, politics, medicine as a whole. And if you have the opportunity and are in the area, we'd love for you to come here and share it with you.
Oh, Patrick, that's wonderful. I have to say one thing. When I first came to visit and do the terrain walk to come to the museum to establish the route we would take and the exhibits we would discuss, I asked Patrick, I said, there are 40,000 objects here, of which you are very familiar with. If you had to describe the history or the evolution of American dentistry with a single display, what would it be? And I still am astounded by the answer.
Yeah, so the answer to that is the toothbrush. So you can take toothbrushes from the last 200 years and really show how dentistry and American culture has progressed, from the chewing stick that was used in early times to the toothbrushes that were made out of wood or fancy metals in the late and mid 1800s, and to cartoon toothbrushes and toothbrushes based on different popular culture aspects even today.
Patrick, thank you. You've been more than kind. As we close our tour, we would like to thank you. We'll be back here. This will not be our last time here. The American College of Dentists is also a supporter of the Samuel D. Harris National Dental Museum, as Samuel D. Harris was a supporter of the American College. So it seems perfectly fitting. We've come 100 years with you in this journey of dentistry, and as a college, we will be back. Thank you all. I hope that you have benefited from this lecture. I know I have certainly enjoyed being here. Thank you kindly. Be well.